Okay, good morning. We have that's the paper trail of the daf. This is the difficult daf. We're stuck in the middle of something. So uh, let's pick up the paper trail of where we're going. The second half of the daf is considerably easier. The first half is a continuation of yesterday's difficult daf. Okay, so we're picking it up. Again, this is just quick bullets. Yud Zayin Amid Aleph, bottom line. Yud Zayin Amid Aleph, bottom line. Rab Chia bar Abba Rab Yochanan, Hatoyin Achar Ma'aser Bezdin Lo Klum. If a person claims he paid up, there's no edim. He claims he paid up after a Ma'aser Bezdin, for example, ksuba or the Trai ksuba, whatever. Lo Klum. You don't believe him. We don't believe him. That's his rule. Lo Klum. Okay, and the Gemara said it Ma'aser Bezdin like you're holding it in your hands. Rab Chia bar Abba commented on the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan that, what are you telling me? You're an Amayra. It's a Mishnah. The Mishnah says if a woman takes out a get and she has no ksuba, she collects. Even if the guy says, I paid up, even if the guy said, I paid up, she collects. Now, obviously, a get is a Ma'aser Bezdin. And so what do you see? That a person's not believed on a Ma'aser Bezdin if he doesn't have Eidim. So what are you, Rabbi Yochanan, be mechadish, if in fact a person can produce a get, which is Ma'aser Bezdin. The guy says, I paid it up, the ksuba, even though there's no ksuba, right? I paid it up. You're not believed. So what's your chiddush? So Rabbi Yochanan tied, well, if not that I showed this jewel, I unearthed this jewel, you wouldn't have gotten it. Abaye says he doesn't understand. He says the raya that Rabbi Chia bar Abba is bringing, l'chayra, is not a raya to a Ma'aser Bezdin. It could be speaking in a place, but they don't write a ksuba. So the reason you're not believe the reason why over there has nothing to do with the fact that it's the Ma'aser Bezdin, because maybe they didn't write a ksuba. That's why you believe, because there is no ksuba there. Abaye then retorted, no, it can't be. It must be. It is a good proof from that Mishnah, because it has to be speaking in a place where they did write a ksuba. Because if not, how could an almana from Erisin ever collect? The Gemara then digressed to discuss where do you know this din of almanim and erisin from, and we concluded that we didn't have a source. We concluded at that point we didn't have a source because it said, "What are you collecting?" You're saying you collect the whole thing, meaning the Tanai Bezdin and the 200. If it's speaking that if she had a ksuba, all you would get would be it could be speaking where the guy wrote it. So it must be that the guy wrote it, so there's no raya. In other words, really, there is no source for a ksuba. If a guy wants to write a ksuba for a woman, he can. If he wants to write, he could. What's the raya that he did is because it's more than 200, more than 100. There was goiva es hakol, you collect everything. Even more than the traditional 200 for the basula, 100 for the almana. So there was no source for an almana. So again, we wanted to bring a raya. Abaye wanted to bring a raya that the Mishnah of Metzia get could be a good proof to the fact that Ma'aser Bezdin, if the guy Tainus Prati is not believed, and what's the raya? If you produce a get, you collect a ksuba. They wanted to prove that maybe it's speaking in a place where they didn't have a ksuba. We wanted to prove it's a place they do have ksuba, and we haven't proven it's a place they have ksuba, because it could be that he wrote it. So now we're going to try one more chance to prove that an almana gets a ksuba, that almana or gerusha from erisin gets a ksuba, and if that's the case, if she does get a ksuba, then l'chayra you would have a good raya. You would not have a good raya to Ma'aser Bezdin because maybe she has ksuba in the first place. Says the Gemara on Yud Ches Amid Aleph. Here's the source for an almana, for a ksuba for an arusa. Ishtoi arusa, a woman that's an arusa, and she died. She's his wife, but they never consummated the marriage yet. There was no nisuin. Loy oinin. Now, the din of aninus is a person can't eat kachim. So if his wife dies and she's not buried yet, he's an onain. There's no din of aninus to stop him from eating kachim. V'loy metamala, if it's a koyin, he can't be metama to her. The Kohen says Kiyam she'eroi haikara ve'lov. That's the lashon. She'eroi is lashon of a she'er basa. That is a kir of basa, meaning there was nisuin, not erisin. So if there was only married in erisin, there never was she'eroi, which is the lashon of a kohen coming with tamata she'eroi. It's not she'eroi because the marriage was never consummated. The chen he loy oinenes. If she, in fact, also if he dies, can he catch him? Loy mitamala. Rashi just points out there's no issa for a woman to be mitamala mason. She's a kohenes. It's just that if the kohen does not want to be mitama, we force him, or we don't even force. Mesa, if she dies, ain't a yarsha, he doesn't inherit her. If she dies from erisin, you don't inherit her. Meshu, if he dies, goyv ksuvasa. So there's your raya that what? That she has a ksuba. Says the Gemara, maybe there's no raya. Dilma the kosav law. Maybe he, in fact, he wrote her. Maybe he wrote it for her. V'chi tema, if the kosav law, ma'ila memra, if you're going to tell me if he wrote it for her, then what's the chiddush? I'll tell you what, that if you wrote it for her, she collects a ksuba. Of course she collects a ksuba. He wrote it, so what's the chiddush? The chiddush is not the ksuba part. The chiddush of this statement is Mesa, if she dies, ain't a yarsha. It's rechale. You need that chiddush. You need that chiddush. So memela what? We have no proof that a woman who is an almana from erisin gets a ksuba. We have no proof to that. So therefore, Abaya said before, and Abaya wanted an upslug, Reb Chia in the name of Reb Yochanan, from a Mishnah in Ksubis that said in Gittin, if in Ksubis it is actually, if you take the get and you produce it, you collect the Ksuba, and this guy is not believed to say he paid up. He's not believed to say he paid up, right? He wanted to say that it may be there, he wanted to disprove it. And then he says, no, I can't disprove it. In other words, it really is a good proof. And the proof is from Almana of Erisin. But now we have no proof because Almana of Erisin maybe doesn't have Ksuba. So we have to restore, again, here's the bullet point, guys. The din Rabbi Yochanan, that Maisa Bezdin, the guy's not believed without Eidim. Abaya says it's a Mishnah. That's what's your Chiddush. Abaya trying to disprove the Mishnah. And therefore it is a good proof. Abaya's in not being able to disprove the Mishnah until now. And now we're gonna say and say the Mishnah is not a good proof, and therefore you have to come on to Reb Chia's din. So what's the case now? So from the Mishnah itself, in other words, initially he wanted to disprove it from Almana of a Gerusha of an Erisin, or of a Gemara or Gerusha of Erisin. He's going to disprove his proof from the Mishnah itself. Ella, Abaya migufa demastis kahadebe. Abaya from goof of the Mishnah itself, that the Mishnah, she produces a get, she collects a ksuba, and he can't taina, I paid up. You wouldn't disprove it from itself. If you're telling me it's a place where you don't write a ksuba, and really you don't have a proof, the reason why you collect is because it's a place that you don't have a ksuba, and therefore you're collecting the get kind of ksuba, and the ksuba is the get. To get manu masayim ksiv bay. In a get, does it say anything about the amount you're collecting, 100 or 200? Since the Rabbanan said you can collect your ksuba using the get, why don't we view it as if it was written 100 and 200 in the get? So therefore, and that's the case, and litlain velema parati, let him say that, well, look, I paid it up. I paid it up, and it'll be believed. You're going to say, if you paid it up, you should have written up the get. Amalon, they tell Amalon, he can say to us, like Shafkin, she didn't let me rip it up. I really paid up, but she didn't let me rip it up. Right? Why did she say, Amra, I have to get married. And the only way for me to get married is to prove I was divorced. How am I going to prove divorce if I don't have a get? You should have gone ahead and ripped up the get. And written in Bezdin, Gitan Dinon, this get. The Karanuhu that's ripped up. It's not because it's a get puzzle. It's ripped up that it shouldn't be used what? For another time. You shouldn't be able to collect the ksuba a second time. And therefore, it's not ripped up. And in other words, why didn't you do that? And since you didn't do that, that's why we don't believe you. So he said, "To call the magbe beitin magbe." Does everyone go ahead, go ahead and get divorced in Bezdin? That we can rip it up in Bezdin. So what's the reason that he's not able to say I paid up? What's the reason? It's not because of any of these reasons. The reason he's not believed is simply for one reason: the fact that it's a Maisa Bezdin, and a Maisa Bezdin lo yama klum. So therefore, Abaya, in fact, said it's a good raya from Metzia get to Rabbi's din of what of Maisa Bezdin. Okay, that's basically it. Again, it is a bit. I'm not saying it's not a bit foggy, but I'm taking you from the beginning to the end. The beginning is his Rabbi's statement that Maisa Bezdin lo yama klum, meaning if he says parati, he's not believed. We question along the way while he's saying it. They have a Mishnah that substantiates it. The Mishnah does not substantiate it. You need him to say it itself. That's a little easy Gemara. Says the Mishnah. And this really is an introduction to Elam Metzias. Matzah gitei nashim, if a man finds a get of an isha, b'shechuri avodim, or shtar shichro of an eved, shtar of an eved's fee, daitiki. What's a daitiki? What's a daitiki? Is the shtar of a shchivmeira, right? The shchivmeira, he commands something, we write it down. Dat, and it's no trikin. The word daitiki is no trikin of dat tehei koi. Da, hey, it should be koi like this. Da tehei koi. Matana, a shtar matana, shoivrim a receipt. In all these cases, harizeh lo yachzer. Do not return it to the individual. Either one. You don't return it to. Shani Omer, Kesuvim Hayu, they were written. The Nimlach Aleihem, the person went ahead and decided not to give them. Shalai Litna, not to give them. So the person decided not to give the get, the person decided not to free his Eved, the person decided not to give the matana, right? And all these, therefore don't get it. Okay, now we're going to get into Masech the Gittin a little bit. Okay, we're above Metzia meets Gittin. Taima, the reason why we don't return the get is the Nimlach, is because he changed. We say that maybe he changed his mind. Shalai Litna, not to give it. Ha'ama Tenu, what happens if he would have said Tenu? What happens if he would have said to give it? The nice thing. Then we back with what? We would give it. Then we would give it, right? In other words, the Mishnah gives a reason. Don't return the get to the Baal, because why? Because maybe he decided not to divorce his wife. If he says, I did decide to divorce my wife, then what? Then we would give it back. Now comes the question. How do we know that it's his get? Okay, so in other words, at first the shaila was whether he wanted to divorce his wife or not. We know he wanted to divorce his wife. Now, but this get has a reyes in the get. What's the reyes that was found in the street? How do we know it's his get or not? So that's the second step, and that's the topic of the daf. How do you know? Va'afil is mamaruba, and the Gemara adds, even if it was found after a long period of time. In other words, if it's found after a long period of time, there's a svara to say maybe it's somebody else's get. Okay? Now, Uriminu, I'll ask you a steer. So again, we're beginning the daf with the following piece of information. If he said, I want to divorce my wife, okay, so here's the shaila. The shaila is the question of, is it his get or not? So he wants to divorce his wife. There's no question about that. We find the get, and we're saying two things. A, once he tells us he wants to divorce his wife, we have no shaila about it. For sure that it's his get, and even if it was there for a long period of time. So that's the supposition over here, that it was that he wants to give it, and it's there for a long period of time. Urmenu, I'll ask you a steer on that from a Mishnah in Gittin. Hamevi get v'avadi menu. A person brings the get and it's lost from him. Matzula alter, if you find it immediately, kosher. Imlav, if not, puzzle. There's your kasha. The inference from my Mishnah is, even after a long period of time, is it kosher? Their Mishnah there in Gittin seems to say that what? That matzah alter immediately. And the Gemara there discusses what alter means. But over here, it's mashma for a longer period of time. You have a stira. Why over there for a long period of time is it no good? It has to be la'alter, and over here even a long period of time. Says Gemara, Amar Rabba like Kasha, Kan b'makom shasharis mitzuyos. Over there, it's speaking where there was a lot of traffic. There you found shayaris, literally caravans going back and forth. You found caravans going back and forth. In that situation, we're chayish that it fell from somebody else, and therefore it's not his get. And over here, Kan in our Mishnah, b'makom shein shayaris mitzuyos. So therefore, since there's no traffic and there's no reason to believe that it could have fallen from someone else, therefore, even after a long period of time, we'll believe the get. So that's the teretz to make a chelik. Over there, the shayaris mitzuyos, there's traffic. Over here, there's no traffic. Says the Gemara, an addendum. And even in a case, right, with a shayaris mitzuyos, roast coffee. And even in a place with shayaris mitzuyos, it's dafka v'husha huchsu shnei Yosef ben Shimon be'ir achas. In a place where shayaris mitzuyos, right? Yeah. And even a place shayaris mitzuyos, even in those places, you have to go ahead. It has to be that you knew for sure there were people with the same names. Both the woman and the man had the same names. Their wife and the husband had the same names. Because if not, if it's unique names, who cares that shayaris mitzuyos? I would think that it's a unique get. Again, a get has to be written lishma for that individual in his name and her name, right? So l'chayra. So even the place where we say that you're worried that it fell from somebody else, it has to be muhsik that in that place there are two people by the same name. Okay, that's the addendum of Rabbi. So two. Missing one or the other, then it will be a good get after a long period of time. Missing one or the other, it will be a long get. It will be a good get even after a long period of time. Okay. The Eloite Mahachi kosher the Rabbi. If you don't make this addendum, you'd have a question in Rabbi himself. Why? The Hahu Gita the Shtakich Beidina de Rav Huna. There was a get that was found in the Beis Medrash of Rav Huna. That because of Bay, it was written in the get. B'Shviri Masa in the town of Shviri, the Al Rochis Nahara by the river of Rochis. Amar Rav Huna says Rav Huna Amibeis Chayshina l'shnei Shviri said Rav Huna Yechayish v'tu Shviri says Rashi. Afa pisha bo echad lefaneinu v'oma mimeni nafel. A person comes and says in front of us, it fell from him. Uploni hoya mishalchay leishtoi, and Ploni was the one he sent to divorce his wife. The Yodamanu shein sham shviri. And we know that in Shviri there's not shnei anoshim sheshem same shavim. We know that in Shviri there's no people who have the same names and with their wives being the same names. Chashina shem shviri acheres yesh. We're worried maybe there's another Shviri. V'yesh bo Yosef ben Shimon acher. In that town of Shviri, we're worried. So therefore, Rav Huna is a tremendous chumrah that even though in this place we know, but maybe in Shviri there's another Shviri with people with the same name. But that's a v'amalei Rav Chisda leRabba says Rav Chisda to Rabba poik ayin ba. Go check into this matter. The leorta boy minach Rav Huna. Rav Huna is going to ask your opinion on this matter. Nafik dak. Rabba went out and he found that none kol ma'aser bezdin harizeh yachzir. Any ma'aser bezdin harizeh yachzir. Says Rashi. Kol milsa de asa lebezdin lekayim. Anything that came to bezdin for authentication. The leka lemechish lenimlach aleim, where we're not concerned that the person changed his mind. Like we said, guys, and once you have the henpick, right? You know the halvot took place, correct? Guys, going back to something we did the other day. If you find a star with a henpick, you're not chayish. Maybe they went to go ahead and borrow and not borrow. Because once they went to the trouble of bezdin, you know what? If the transaction is taking place. So here as well, once something's brought to bezdin, we're not chayish, therefore, that he changed his mind not to divorce his wife. Shleilitnam, how you say yachzir, you give it back. And therefore, this star was mekuyim. That's why they brought it to bezdin. It was mekuyim. So kol ma'aser bezdin, how you say yachzir? Okay. Now, for Beidina de Rav Huna, the yeshiva, the Beis Medrash of Rav Huna, the chimokim she'ashayaris mitzuyas dami. Again, there was a lot of traffic over there. and therefore it's the possibility exists that the get fell from another person. The kaposhit Rabba the Aksir, and Rabba said you return it. Alma, you see, it's not enough, guys. Shayaris mitzuyos. You need, in addition, that you'd have to worry about a person by the same name. So ihuchzik shnei Yosef and Shimon in Eloi Loi. Okay, so now going back to the Amid Aleph. So we said we had a kasha from the Gemara in Gittin. Over here it says only even after a long period of time. Over there it says la'alter. Here it's speaking where there is not a lot of traffic. There is speaking it is a lot of traffic. Rabbah qualifies the Gemara there, even when it's speaking when there's a lot of traffic, it must be that people it's speaking where they have the same name. If not that this thing about the same name, then you have a kasha of Rabbah and Rabbah because of the Ma'aser Rav Huna. Because he said that what? It's the place of Rav Huna was a place where there was a lot of traffic, and said Rabbah, return it. But one second, if that's the only quality that we look into, so why are you returning it? You know why you're returning it? Because there's another factor. What's that factor? You have to be masik that a person by the same names. So that would explain why he says Yachzer over there. Very geshmak. Okay. Says the Gemara. Alma Yosef ben Shimon in Leiloi. Ovid Rabba Uvda Bekisna de Pumpadisa. Rabba in the house of flax and Pumpadisa Kishmaitza. It's my mashma. You see, this thing would never happen. You're sitting here saying, "How is it possible people lose the get?" You might see. I said it happened. Havi Uvda, there was an incident. Bekisna de Pumpadisa Kishmaitza. Now, Rabba acted according to his psak. Now, the Gemara is going to say, what did he do? What did he do? Ikedi Amri, Heicha de Mazbe Kisna. It was a place where they sold flax, and they sold flax, so there was a lot of traffic. And the reason he returned it is, even though there was a lot of traffic, and there's a smart to say it fell from somebody else, it's because they weren't muksik that a man and a wife would have the same name in that place. The Ikedi Amri, listen to this. Heicha de Tori Kisna. It's a place where they soak flax. Now, when you soak flax, there's not a lot of traffic. And even though in that place there were two people whose wives, Benjamin, Sarah, there were two people who had a guy with the same name, right? And his wife had the same name. But nonetheless, he didn't return it. You know why? He returned it. You know why? Because since there wasn't a lot of traffic, we're going to say it fell from him. Good. So therefore, Rabbah acted upon his psak. So again, Rabbah's psak, if you have, in order to return it, right, you want to return it even after a long period of time. Even after a long period of time, two qualities. One, that if there was shayaris, again, long period of time, nothing. There was no shayaris, and even hochsik, you would return it. If shayaris, you would need hochsik. If shayaris, you wouldn't return it unless hochsik. Not hochsik, then you would return it even after a long period of time. Reb Zera roim mastis in a brisa. Reb Zera, he asked the steer from a Mishnah on a brisa. Umeshani. Tanan. Hamevi get, the Abadi menu, someone brings the get, and it's lost from him. Matzanu alta kosher. If you find it, immediately it's kosher. Vimlav, puzzle. And if not, it's puzzle. Okay. Uriminu alias yustira, matzah get isha b'shuk, bisman shabal moide, yachsel isha. Ein abal moide lo yachsel, lo lezeh v'lo lezeh. Ketani miyos, bisman shabal moide, yachsel isha. V'afil lizman ruba. Yet over the Mishnah said la'alter. So, umeshani kam b'makom shayaras mitzuyos, kam b'makom shena shayaras mitzuyos. So notice, Rabbah asked the stira from a Mishnah and getting to our Mishnah here in Bab Metzia. Reb Zera is asking from a Mishnah from a brisa to a Mishnah. What did Reb Zera not like about the Mishnah to Mishnah that he went from a Mishnah to a brisa? It's much stronger to ask from a Mishnah. The Mishnah was edited. The Mishnah was edited, and so therefore it'll be a much more powerful question. So the question is, what forced Reb Zera to go ahead and leave Rabbah? Rabbah asked from one Mishnah to another Mishnah. Reb Zera went from a brisa to a Mishnah. Fred the Gemara Kasha. Ikadiami, Vahusha Huchsaku, Deloy Nahadar, that it's speaking where what? It was muhsik, that there were two people by the same name, and therefore they didn't return it for Hainu de Rabba, and that's Rabba's din. Ikadiami, Afagab Deloy Huchsaku, even if it wasn't muhsik, Loy Neda didn't return it, Upligi de Rabba. And he argues what on Rabba. Okay, and he argues on Rabba. So again, Rabbi Zera returned it, either because it was muhsik, and that's why it's muhsik not returning, he agreed with Rabba, or he did return it because he didn't agree with Rabba. So just the fact that Shiar's Mitsuyas will be enough of a reason not to return it. Upligi the Rabba. Okay, now. So that question is whether Rabbi Zera agrees with Rabba or disagrees with Rabba. That's an Ikka Di'amri. If he returned it, it's because he agreed with Rabba because there wasn't muhsik. If he didn't return it, because even without muhsik, he disagreed with Rabba. Bottom line is, why did Rabba went from a Mishnah to a Mishnah? Our Mishnah to the Mishnah in Gittin. Yet he went from a Brisa. Fred Marakasha. Bishlema Rabba Le'ama Kreb Zera from the Brisa Masnisan Alim Leilak Shuye. It's much stronger to ask from a Mishnah. After all, it's a Mishnah. Ela Rav Zera my time Le'ama Karabba. Why do you go from a Brisa? Now, if you notice, our Mishnah fellas, we made a few suppositions. We went one. It said that if he would say give it, and even after a long period of time, it doesn't say that in the Mishnah. We suppose that in the Mishnah. So that's Reb Zera's problem. Says Reb Zera, my time it did not say in our Mishnah if he says that you give it. Maybe immediately. Let's go back to Amar Aleph. Go back to the Amar Aleph, guys. Says the Gemara, Taima de Nimlach. The reason why we don't know if he changed his mind or not. But if he says give it, nice then. And now, so good. That makes sense. Maybe only La'alter. Maybe only La'alter. You suppose that even after a long period of time. You projected that in there. How do you know he admits that? Maybe it means La'alter, and there is no kasha to the Gemara. Therefore, as the Uriminu, Hamevi Gevo, Avidimenu, Matzala Alta Kasha. If you don't suppose that it means it's your supposition that makes it into a kasha. That's what Reb Zera didn't like. In other words, if it's true what you think, then it's a kasha. Like Reb Zera, it's an Afna Brisa that says it's got to be La'alta. It can't be Lachas Man. That's Pshat. Says so. Let's see it inside. Bishlema Rabban Rabba Le'ama Zera Mastisna Limelech Shuye. El Zera my time Le'ama Karabba Amalach Mi Katoni Ama Tenu Naisnim Vafilas Mamaruba Dilma Ha'ama Tenu Naisnim. You'll give it Ulaylam Kidakaimi Kaimel Alta. Okay, Lamandi Ama. Okay. Now, but as opposed to Reb Zera, where it says openly, Matzah get isha b'shuk b'sman shabal moida yachsel isha ein abal moida lo yachsel lo lezev lo lezer b'sman shabal moida afilas mamruba. Even after what, a long period of time. If he's moida, even after a long period of time. Is that what he means? Yeah. Okay. Now, Reb Zera b'makom shashuras mitzuyas v'afgav shlei hochsuk shtei Yosef ben Shimon upligi de Rabba b'may pligi. Now, one of the opinions were that in a place where shiras mitzuyas, even though you do not have two people by the same name, you won't give it back. What's the machlokes? Outside guys. Reb Zera needed two things in order to return it after a long period of time. One, she'eras mitzuyos, and two, huchsik, two people by the same name. Then you won't return it. What about if you're missing one or the other? You would return it. Reb Zera said, even if you just have she'eras mitzuyos, that will be enough of a reason not to return it. Why does he argue? What's the machloikus about having a person there or not? Rabbi Zeir is disagreeing with that second idea of being muchzik to people. Why? What's wrong with that? L'chayra, Rabbi is correct, right? Having a get by two people, the same name, it's such a far-fetched idea. Yet Rabbi Zeir says, no, it's not such a far-fetched idea. Even if you don't know for sure that two people by the same names, you would be worried about that. Why? That's what the Gemara is going to go into now. Now, what are they arguing in? Rabbi Savar Diktani, Kol Maisa Bezdin Harizay Yachzer. Right? Rabbi says, any Maisa Bezdin, you return. The Shtakik with Bezdin Askina, and it's speaking where you found it in Bezdin. Ubezdin Kimachim Shayars Mitzuyos. Vahusha Huchsik Lo Yachzer. Right? And there, if you're muchsik, there are two people by the same names, then Lo Yachzer. Loy hochsik, if you're not muchsik, two people by the same names, yachzer. Rabbi Zeir Amalach, and Rabbi Zeir will tell you, Mikitoni kol ma'aseh bezdin shenimtzu bebezdin. He didn't say any ma'aseh bezdin that's found in bezdin. Kol ma'aseh bezdin yachzer. Any ma'aseh bezdin kitoni. Uloilim b'shtachach abroi. And you found it what? Outside of bezdin. And nonetheless, what's the din? Lo yachzer. So what's the reason, fellas? It must be why? Because sheyaros mitzuyos. Okay. Rav Yirmiyah Amar going to army Eidim ma'olam lechasmanu ela al get echad shel Yosef ben Shimon. Eidim said, you know what? There's always a third factor, guys, right? There's the man's name, there's the woman's name. What about the Eidim? So now we have another fact that we can go in. We can go ahead. That the Bryce is meduyik, that you'll return it even after a long period of time, is speaking the Ka'armi Eidim. Eidim say, Me'olam lechasmanu ela al get echad shel Yosef ben Shimon. We signed on many gittim, but only one of them was named Yosef ben Shimon. Yihachi ma'lemem. So what's the chiddush that you return al pi Eidim? This is the chiddush. So ma'adu teim alechish dilma isrami shma kishma v'edim keidim. I might think that maybe it happens that just like you'll have two people by the same names and the remote you'll have Eidim. So it's Kamashmo, and that Azam, we don't go so far. We don't go so far. If Eidim said we signed on only one, we're not chayish, there was another pair of Eidim by the same name. Rav Ashi Amar, the din of the Mishnah that you return it, Kigoin de Ka'amar, Nekev Yesh Boy Beget, Bitzara is Pliny. Now we're going to see this sugi guys of Simonim and Elam Metzias. Says that, you know what, I know this get is mine because there's a hole in the get. So he gives a siman, and that's how you know the get is his get. Now, v'dafka, it's got to be a siman muvak. He doesn't say there's a hole in the get, but he says, b'tzad ois ploinus. The hole is on the side of the test, whatever igeres, he knows the letter exactly where it is, and therefore you're going to return it and say it's his get. Aval nekev al mastam nekev loy, that's not a good siman. So now, why? Shrav Ashi misaf galei. Why do you need a siman muvik? Because Rav Ashi is misupik if simonim either raisi derabbanan. Tell us just a short lesson. If somebody goes ahead and loses something and says that's mine, midoraisa he'd have to bring edim. He'd have to bring edim that it's his. Just because somebody says something is his doesn't make it his. I see something nice in your hands. I want it. It's mine. You're being typhus. What do you mean? How do I know it's yours? I know it's not mine. I found it. But how do I know it's yours? Now you know it's mine? Here's two Eidim saying it's mine. Maybe that's the only way you can get back in Metzia by bringing Eidim. So the Chum said, guess what? If you don't have Eidim, but if you have Simonim, if you go get and give Simonim to something, it lends credibility that it must be yours, that you know it well. Now it could be that that's a D'Rabbanan Dikadin. However, if I have a siman muvak, if I have a siman that is outstanding, that only I could possibly know, that even there might be the raisa. So therefore, stam to say there's a hole in the get, that's a siman. To say there's a hole in the letter of Aleph that's next to that, it's a high level. So therefore, it says the Gemara, that's what Rav Ashi needs. It says Rav Ashi, misafkale simonim deraisa derabanan, or the simonim are deraisa derabanan. And therefore, you needed what? Therefore, you needed that siman. Okay, I wish everyone a great day. Say a kapitel tehillim. Thank you for listening.